question is, do I have to say the reason I'm recusing? And if I do, who do I tell? So there is no rule that says when you recuse, you have to say why on the record, but we think it's a best practice to give a brief explanation. By the way, I'm recusing from this matter, Madam Chair. My apologies. I'm recusing, Madam Chair, because I have a family member that's involved, and I'll be filing a recusal statement. Or just a brief explanation as to why. Because if you don't, then the public is all, why is he recusing? And we get calls all the time. They didn't say why he was recusing. Doesn't he have to? Well, he doesn't have to, but it sure does help. Then you're going to fill out a recusal statement, a conflict of interest form, and you can get copies of those from our website, but I think you will find that your legal counsel or whoever it is that kind of runs your meetings has them. You should have them right there in the room. And it's just a one-page form, and it will also have a space for you to briefly, in one sentence, list the reason you're recusing. You'll sign that. You'll send it to the Ethics Commission. We keep those as a public record, and now you've done everything right. You haven't participated. You've filled out the conflict of interest statement / recusal form. You've sent it to the Ethics Commission. Your minutes will also show that you've recused, and you've done it all right. Question?
So what if you are in a situation where maybe you're in executive session or even in an open session, and you feel that another committee member may have a conflict of interest and they're not recusing themselves? How do you, and especially if it's someone like a chair or a vice chair that might have, the authority to say, no, I'm staying in this meeting and I'm going to do my job. How do you handle that?
This is a really good question, and it comes up a lot. You think someone else on your board should be recusing, and maybe he or she is, maybe he or she isn't, but you're not quite sure how to handle it. Also, the issue with the chair, on a slightly separate issue, for those of you that are the presiding officer of your board, when you recuse, are you allowed to keep the gavel? And I won't vote, but I'm still going to decide who gets to talk and in what order. And I know you're all shaking your head no, but I see it over and over and over. It's so common. So just to be clear, if you're the president or chair or presiding officer, when you recuse, you pass the gavel to the vice chair. You don't get to preside over the meeting when you've recused from that part of the meeting. But what do you do? First, I will say that there's no legal obligation for you to go to extreme lengths to stop someone who has a conflict from engaging in a conflict. That doesn't mean you shouldn't. And the advice that I generally give people is this. When you think someone either is currently violating the code or is going to if they participate in that item, I believe that you owe it to that person, you owe it to your constituents, you owe it to the town, to give them the benefit of the doubt and try to question them before they do it. Give that person a chance to not violate the law before the meeting. Hey, have you considered that maybe you might have a conflict if you called the Ethics Commission? I think maybe you should. We could continue this for another week while you get some advice from the Ethics Commission. I would just like you to consider it. Go talk to your legal counsel. Hey, does Jeff know that there might be a problem here? I think maybe you ought to talk to him before we get to that item on the agenda tonight. It's really worth it. So I think that's the first step to take. Beyond that, it's up to you. If you want to talk about it in an open session, you want to raise it as an issue, I guess you can. If you want to call the Ethics Commission and talk to us about someone who you think has violated the code, we'll listen. But what we would rather you do is try and deal with it before it becomes an issue. We think that you owe it to the public to help your committee people avoid conflicts of interest.
What if they recuse, the minutes reflect recusal, the form is never submitted?
They recuse, the minutes reflect it, but the form is never submitted.
So
this happens.
Say to them, we have the forms at the district. We give them the form, it never gets submitted, even after repeated requests and reminders. Did you submit?
Here's what will happen. There has never been a case where the Ethics Commission has initiated a complaint against a person in those circumstances. So the circumstances are the person had a conflict, he actually recused like he was supposed to, The minutes show that he recused, but he didn't fill out that piece of paper and send it to the Ethics Commission, the recusal form, like he's supposed to. In those cases, we won't initiate a complaint as long as the person hasn't recused. However, we've had people file complaints against people alleging and it is a violation of the code to not file that piece of paper. And, we have to go forward on those complaints. So it's not listen, it's not the crime of the century, but it doesn't have to be with an ethics complaint. That's front page in your local paper. You had an ethics complaint filed against you, even if it turns out to be nothing. We had a complaint filed against someone who they simply waited too long to file the form. So in a particular town, the town clerk would mail us all of the recusal statements, but she would hold on to them till she had enough to send a big stack. And sometimes she would wait a couple of months. And the local gadfly found out that someone he hated hadn't filed his timely recusal forms and filed a complaint because, waiting 2 or 3 months to file your forms. And his defense was, well, our clerk does it. But the code doesn't say, oh, if someone else does it, it's okay. So if you have a lazy clerk, she's not the one who's going to have a complaint filed against her. Just so you know, it's going to be, you.
Jason,
Yes.
I'm going to pose an example to you. I'd like an answer.
Of course.
We had a situation where nine board members, and we had a situation where one of the 9 sued the district for her son being injured on a playground in elementary school. And it came before the board for us in executive session to say yes or no as to and how much we were going to pay. Now, with those other members, a lot of them were friends of each other, and so would you say that it would somehow fall that they had to recuse themselves to vote for that settlement to take place? Or would there not be any, because no direct relationship as in a family member or a business associate? Are we considered to be business associates in a sense?
You're not. Just because you serve on the board together, you're not business associates of each other. And so I think your question here is, a few of the board members were close friends of the one board member whose child was injured. And the question as to them was, should they be participating when we all know how close they are and how aligned maybe they are? Is that the question?
Yes.
We wouldn't get involved in that. And the reason, we would expect that particular member to recuse. Obviously, he or she can't vote whether to settle her own lawsuit.
Right.
Right, and in what amount. So once she's out, but the board does have to vote. And who's going to decide who's close enough friends that they need to leave the room too? Let's see. Joe's only a Facebook friend; he can stay. But Carol, they had a Halloween party that they invited her family to, so she's got to go. And so, with friends and enemies, we don't make those judgment calls. That's more of an appearance of impropriety issue that we let the board members themselves work out.
So you don't rate the school committee members as a group being associates in some form?
No.
Thank you.
No, we don't. Did that answer the question?
Yes.
Okay, good.
Okay, this has to do with recusal versus abstain from a vote.
Mm-hmm.
Does the Ethics Commission see that as the same or something different, or?
So
how
the
is that
question,
handled?
sure. The question is, do we view there to be a difference between someone recusing versus someone abstaining? And where this normally comes up would be, so someone's going to recuse, but they want to still count her presence toward a quorum so that the board can continue to operate even though she's recused on the matter. Is that kind of what you're getting at too? So it may or may not surprise you to know that the commission doesn't care either way. We don't ever differentiate between what you call it. You can call it recusal, abstention, you can call it, all we care about is if you have a conflict, don't participate, and call it whatever you want to call it. Then the idea as to whether or not you're counted toward a quorum, That has to do with your bylaws. That's an issue for Robert's Rules of Order and your particular bylaws. But as long as you're not participating, we don't really care what your board decides to do in your absence. It's not an ethical issue. It's more a procedural issue. So we're not going to get involved in that. That's up to you and your legal counsel to figure out whether you have a quorum if you recuse or don't recuse.